everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD, anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety therapy. So welcome everybody to the show. For those of you who are new to the show, this is a question and answer based podcast where you can send me questions about OCD and anxiety treatment, and I will likely put it up on a future episode. So if you would like a question answered on a future episode, you can go to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the submit a question link there. Now, if you would like to cut the line of the backlog of questions, you can submit an audio question. There are a number of different ways that you can go about doing that. Best ways to record it into your phone, or record it into Google Drive or Google or whatever app that you have, and send me a copy of the link to it. This was recently done by another listener, and that will go up on a next episode. But you can record yourself asking your question, and it will go up on a future episode, and the next episode that I have. So again, everybody who has asked a question, thank you so much for sending them in. We've got a ton of questions, and it just means that this podcast gets to keep going on a little bit longer. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. We are diverting from that format and continuing on for the Anxiety in the Arts series. So for this episode, I was able to have a very talented tattoo artist named Rick Fitzwater. So he has joined me for this episode to talk about his work, talk about how he got into tattooing, how he has dealt with anxiety throughout all of it, and specifically some of the stuff that he does that has been helpful in dealing with anxiety or doubt or uncertainty or just questions about his own skill. And what I love about having this conversation is, gosh, when we think about having anxiety at the work that we do, we can kind of talk ourselves out of it, quote, being a problem, or I can always fix it, or if there's a problem somewhere, like my boss will catch it, or my supervisor, my coworker, or my manager will catch it, and they'll let me know. But gosh, me talking to Rick about doing tattoo work, I was thinking, man, if there's an error, it's there. He's tattooing people. This is permanent stuff, right? So I know very well that I just can't. I would never be a tattoo artist. I don't know about any of you, but I'm glad that there are folks like Rick out there who are doing this work. So this was a fantastically fun episode. I learned a ton about what goes into tattooing, what goes into the process, into the education, into the day-to-day work of what it means to be a tattoo artist. Some of it I think has dispelled some misconceptions that I had. It's also, and I'll say this about not just certainly the conversation with Rick, but in every job that I learn about, it dispels some misconceptions that I have and makes me have so much more respect, and so much more respect for the person, for the job that person has, but also an understanding of the stressors, pressures that go into it, and for the vast majority of people, gosh, just how much training and thought and effort and talent goes into doing that job. That is the case here with my conversation with Rick. Now, I'll say this from the very top: there's a lot of profanity in this episode. So if you are someone who is uncomfortable with profanity, you can just go ahead and skip this one. But if you are not, there was no reasonable way for me to edit it all out. So I'm leaving it all in, unedited. So if you are squeamish, I'm sorry, but this is who Rick is, and he expressed himself in the way that he saw fit. And let's be honest, sometimes with our pirate language, it's the best and only way that we have to describe the situation that we're in. So there's a warning on that. But let me tell you a little bit about Rick before we jump into the episode. Rick is a tattoo artist with Twisted Love Tattoo Collective in Jupiter, Florida. When he is not tattooing, you can find him painting or deep sea fishing. So, without further ado, here's my interview with Rick. All right, Rick, thanks so much for joining us here on the podcast.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we were just talking about what you do and how you do it, but if you could just share with listeners a little bit about you, what you do, and we'll launch off from there.
All right. My name's Rick. I'm a tattoo artist out here in Jupiter, Florida. Work at a shop called Twisted Love Tattoos. It's been doing it for the last 2 years that I've been in Florida. Last probably collective 8 on and off. Completed my apprenticeship in 2008 and volleyed between tattooing and the trades, and finally decided tattooing was the way to go, and absolutely adore it, every second of it. So.
That's awesome. Well, tell me a little bit about what. So I see that you've got a bunch of. So I guess the listeners can't hear this. You have a bunch of art behind you. I assume this is work that you've done.
Yes. Yeah, I picked up a paintbrush before I picked up a tattoo machine, so it's just been a logical progression.
I was gonna say, could you share a little bit about how you got into that, or what got you started with your interest in doing visual art and how it progressed into tattooing?
I've always been kind of a loner, and so when all the kids go play basketball or some team sport and stuff like that, lunch or recess or whatever, I'd kind of cruise around and sit down underneath a tree and draw landscapes, or I'd be insanely bored in class and doodle in the margins. So I've always been moving ink or graphite around on pieces of paper since I was a little kid. And then I went to UC Santa Barbara and started majoring in things that I wasn't really interested in again. And so, I'd pick up a general ed class where, they touched on either Rembrandt or Michelangelo, but ever so briefly. But I would see those images and go and look them up and print them out. And then I would use those as reference for my doodles in business econ, things you should have paid attention to. But, yeah, so my drawing's kind of taken off. I have a better understanding of it, and college is the time that kids get out from under their parents' wings but still have mommy and daddy's credit cards, so they start dabbling around in light body modification, the basic piercings and some really cool tattoos for when you were like 18. You got the biohazard sign and yada yada yada. So I hung out with a bunch of kids who were not visually or were artistically inclined, and so they'd always drop comments like, "Oh man, I have all these ideas for this cool sleeve this guy's gonna slap on me, and he's gonna do it out of his garage." Yeah. So I was always the one who would pipe up for a little side hustle money. I'll draw it out for you. You just give me your ideas and I'll slap it out. We'll go back and forth until you find something you like, and then you shoot me $80 for the design, and then go have Joe Schmo or whoever's gonna do it go tattoo it on you. And they come back pumped up on life, and the tattoo would look like dog shit. And whatever. I got my beer money, and we go out and pray. And so I'm telling my parents this. I'm telling my sister this, and my parents have always had a business oriented minds, and so they said, "Why are you settling for peanuts when you can get the whole tree?" And so I fought. I fought the anxiety of being culpable for permanently marking people's bodies. It wasn't for me. I didn't want to be held accountable for potentially blowing somebody's skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I fought it for a while, and I ended up going into a local tattoo shop with one of my friends who brought me to Career Artists for my first tattoo. And he was a really rad dude, and we parted ways, and about 6 months later, I finally started getting the itch and started sniffing around shops, and I got shut down like 10, 15 times, just anywhere from not looking for it right now to stone cold, get the fuck out of my shop. So I finally reached out to this dude because, my friend, I'd been tattooed by him, and he was friends with my friend. And so I said, "Yeah, man, I've been shut down a lot. I'm looking to get into the industry. I was wondering if you'd help me out about that." And he told me to bring my portfolio by, and so I brought it by the next day, and one thing led to another, and I started hanging around, cleaning up the shop, scrubbing tubes for him, and then it was turned into a full-blown apprenticeship.
That's bonkers.
So,
So to give people an idea about what an apprenticeship looks like, so I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about how people get into tattooing and what it takes to then become a tattoo artist. So what did you have to do to get to that place?
I did a traditional apprenticeship. Since I started mine and have successfully completed it, there have been the implementation into modern society of these, quote, tattoo schools where you pay an ungodly amount of money and you get classroom time, which is fantastic. You get a lot of theory, and tattooing is a lot of theory, color theory, basic physics on how the needle impacts the skin, enters the skin, abuses the skin, how the pigments sit, where the pigments sit, all that fun stuff. So you get all of this in a classroom setting, but you never get the hands-on experience of tracing a rose 300 times to get the muscle memory up. You don't get the quote upon quote hazing or abuse that will lead you into being able to survive in any tattoo shop, because it is kind of a different world. If you don't have thick skin, you ain't gonna last. But again, these offered tattoo schools, you get all this theory, but you don't get hands-on approach to figure out what's too deep, what's not deep enough, how to pull a nice clean line, how to bold a line. It's like telling a kid how to measure and handing them a tack hammer and saying, okay, you're a carpenter now, good luck.
Right.
So a true apprenticeship is you are basically this dude's right hand and left hand and feet for about a year to a year and a half, depending on, your learning curve and his ability to teach. So my day began, I'd walk into the shop after my 9 to 5 to make money, because apprenticeships are unpaid. And addressing that, you are being given a life skill that you can go anywhere in this world and set up shop immediately and you're fucking golden, as long as you're good at it.
Right.
So
it's a big gift.
Yeah, that's the trade-off, is you are somebody's bitch for quite a while. So my day would start, I'd get off my 9 to 5, I'd walk straight in, I'd go into the back into what's called a clean room or a dirty room. They're used interchangeably. It's where you scrub all the biohazard. Back then it was the steel tubes that guide the needles and attach to the machine, or the piercing tools, receiving tubes,
You froze up. I don't know if you can hear me.
forceps and hemostats and receiving tubes and all that fun stuff. And then I'd stick them all in the autoclave, and that's a sterilization agent. And then I'd go say hi to everybody. And then whatever my mentor needed, if he was about to tattoo, I would be in charge of sizing the image, burning the stencil, setting him up, which entails, wrapping his tray, wrapping either the tattoo chair or the body table, whatever he was using, wrapping everything. When he was done, I would take down everything and sterilize the entire station. If he was hungry, I'd go run across the street or down the street or wherever the hell he was hungry for, and I'd buy him dinner. Halfway through my apprenticeship, he got a wet and reckless, and he got his driver's license revoked. So I was responsible for driving from my house in Goleta up to Montecito to pick him up, which is about a 20-minute drive for your listeners who have no idea where we're from. Right. And then another 20-minute drive back to the shop to get him to work on time, go through all my apprenti details at the shop during the day. And then when it was time to close up, I would take his ass home 20 miles in the opposite direction of my house, and then 20 miles out to my house. So whatever your mentor needs, hopefully he has a heart. My mentor would tip me out if he had good days, because he knew, I was barely scraping by. Sometimes mentors are just absolute complete assholes and treat their apprentices like trash and just abuse them, thinking it's a rite of passage when it shouldn't.
Right.
But, long-winded reply in a nutshell, basically an apprenticeship is a way of paying for the trade that you're being taught. So you work for free, and, or you could go to that tattoo school for 10 grand and learn almost absolutely nothing but theory.
Right.
So.
Right. Man, that's it's certainly an education for me to hear kind of how that whole process goes. Because again, I don't think I know anybody who would be able to tell me that, how you get to become that. I think it also illustrates how much work, how much time, how much dedication goes into doing this thing so that you know exactly what to do, how to do it in the most correct sort of way. Mm-hmm. But one of the things you also had said, well, actually, I'll say this then. So you went through that whole process, then you've been tattooing from that time, you said, for about 8 years?
On and off. I traded in the trades, doing HVLP painting cars, industrial painting, stuff like that. Because unfortunately, the tattooing industry doesn't come with benefits, and every so often, I like to get my teeth cleaned and my eyes checked.
Crazy.
So I would volley back and forth between tattooing and the trades.
Fair enough. Okay. Do you still?
But honestly, on a side note and a professional note, tattooing is not like riding a bike. So when you slack off and do something else for a year or 2 years, you can't slide right back into tattooing as you were. You don't have the practice, the confidence, and this industry just changes mechanically and artistically at light years at a time. So right. I was doing myself actually a great disservice going back and forth when I should have just rounded out. But in answer to your question, every day to day as my career for the past 2 years.
Okay. So one of the things you had said earlier is that you were fighting getting into tattooing because you're nervous, anxious about, permanently marring somebody. I think I don't know if that's the verbs you use, but I guess tell me about that worry that you had and what it took for you to overcome that to essentially talk yourself into doing it.
I had reservations because, I've always heard there's always that movie with the biker who gets a tattoo that's fucked up and the biker goes and beats somebody. Well, we watch those movies when we're kids, and then eventually you grow up, and if you start hanging around the kind of guys that I was hanging around, you hear stories. Oh man, this guy kind of just blew out this line and it looks like dog shit. I'm going to go back and I'm going to put a lock in a sock and come find him. And, I was hanging out with a bunch of bikers. I was designing tattoos for them. I didn't want to piss them off. I didn't want, if I was the one to fuck that tattoo up on the wrong cat, there's still people in that world that would come find you because you had a bad day. Mm-hmm. And so finally one day I actually, I went to go get my tattoo and I paid, standard tattoo rates at that time. And I was astonished because, there's a lot of money. Tattoo artists generally split whatever they charge, whatever they get for that tattoo in total, they split it 50-50 with the shop. Mm-hmm. So they'll usually kind of kick up standard prices to get them a little bit more loot. But anyway, when it came to my decision, it was just, I love drawing. The world disappears. It didn't matter what the fuck was going on. If I was getting crappy grades or in trouble for smoking pot or shit like that, I could always escape with a pencil or a pen. And so I had to know that, tattooing would have been the same and or better because now I was getting paid for it. So what really made me get into it was A, I could be an artist all day, every day, and B, money. Right. And it comes down to living that dream of you don't work a day in your life if you do what you love.
Right.
So.
Fair enough. So, yeah, I can imagine that's a big turnoff. The idea of messing up somebody's lines and getting hit with a lock.
Yeah.
Were those stories or were those based on evidence? Like, is that just
stories?
Okay, so as you're tattooing, I guess how has it been for you to actually then put I don't know, pencil to paper, as it were, put, needle to skin about kind of managing that thought of actually messing somebody up? Because how has that been going? What have you actually found?
A lot of it has to do with my mentor. I got lucky. He was a friend. He became a good friend, but he was very supportive. Mm-hmm. The tattoo industry isn't all, unicorns and pillows. We don't, you look great today. No, he was supportive in the fact that I had addressed these fears to him because he was, I had been doing it for like 9 months and he's pressuring me. It's time for you to start tattooing. It's time for you to start your journey. And I straight up told him I'm freaked out because I'm worried I'm going to screw somebody up. And he looked at me and he laughed a little bit and he goes, bro, you're going to fuck people up. It's just inevitable. You're learning something that you've never done before. You're going to do it. but you do it on friends, man. You tell them that, and this is what I told the guys that let me start on them. There will be a select few that will get free tattoos for the rest of their life because you're going to.
Hold on, audio cut out. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear you at all.
Allowed me to tattoo them for my first couple tattoos. Were supportive in the fact that they also, as I progressed, allowed me to try things that pushed my limits.
Tell me about that. Tell me about. Could you tell a story about one of those early tattoos? What was that? What was that like to talk to one of your friends, talk him into doing it, and take that risk?
My first couple were not that stressful. Honestly, it was on one of my best friends who later became my brother-in-law, and it ended up falling out completely. So, but he was always gung-ho, push the envelope, let's go, I want to be your first, I want to be your first, yada, yada, yada. So that one wasn't really stressful because it was of the relationship of my, quote, client. I do remember the one that, this is a story I actually still tell to some of my apprentices, but it was on my other best friend at the time. I had been tattooing for probably about 6 months, not professionally. This was all at when my apprenticeship came to a close. We parted ways for whatever personal reasons. So I was effectively tattooing out of the garage, but I was still affiliated with the shop sterilizing my equipment. So it was weird. But anyway, my goal at that time, and still to this day, was to become a photorealistic artist. And I only knew that term because I got really lucky. I hooked up with, or I didn't hook up with one. I got a tattoo spot to be tattooed at the Ventura Tattoo Convention by this up and rising star who's now a huge titan in the industry. But his style was photorealism. So portraits, realistic animals, but all with surrealistic color patterns, and really stellar artists. So that was the direction I wanted to take my tattooing. And so my buddy, who, I'd known him since college. It was a 10-year friendship. And he said that he wanted a realistic great white shark. And it was right around, the time of Shark Week, and he'd been drinking heavily, and it was a great combination for me. So he wanted one of those sharks breaching on the Australian reef, breaching on a seal and all that fun shit. And sure. I was experienced enough to know that all that detail can't be done in a tattoo the size he wanted it to be done. And that's for technical reasons that we can touch on later. But anyway, I talked him into this bitchin' photo. It was a great white, mouth slightly open, and it had all the sun rays on his back. So he had a camel pattern on his back and then the blue on the bottom. So we were both stoked on it. And so the day came, we went out the night before, we got smashed. It was great. So I woke up at like 7 a.m. and I've got like 7 different copies of this fucking shark out. I've got, all of them are stenciled. I'm like cross-eyed and upside down from stenciling all those freaking light rays 7 times. Nobody was up because they were all still passed out. So I make a pot of coffee, a whole pot. And nobody's up. So I'm sitting there studying these stencils, studying my color reference, studying my black and gray reference, getting ready. And I look over and I have drank 2/3 of this pot of coffee.
Awesome.
So I am spun like a rubber chicken, and I'm freaking out. I'm getting like these phases where I got this. Holy shit, that's a lot of detail, and that's a lot of color blending and not a lot of size. It's like, dude, what did I bite off?
You started getting into your head.
Screw up this guy for the rest of his life. I mean, it's an 8-inch, it's like an 8 or 9-inch shark on his rib cage. So he's going to be hating life because the ribs suck ass to get tattooed. Am I going to screw this up? Is it going to come out like, what's it going to look like? Is it going to look like a salamander? Okay. You studied for this. You got this. You color theory, you've been reading, you've been studying, you went to, this is what you trained for. I got this. And it's about an hour and a half of this, just up and down, up and down, up and down. And finally, he opens his door. I was like, yes, man, let's go. I'm ready. I got a pot of coffee made. I've also drank 2/3 of it. Let's go. And I'm like vibrating, almost trying not to turn into just pure energy at that moment. I have so much caffeine. And he goes, oh, man, oh, we're all going to go to Cody's for breakfast. I was like, fuck, that's like a 4-hour breakfast. And I was like, I can't hold still. I've got too much coffee in me, and I'm too fucking stressed about your ribs. We're supposed to tattoo.
We're doing this or not.
Yeah, so they go to breakfast, and I have 4 more hours to go up and down and up and down and up and down. And so finally I just got out. I left everything on the counter, and I just went for a walk around the block. I came back, and, he was there, everybody was ready, and we slapped stencil on. I started tattooing, and man, 5 hours later, it's still one of my better earlier color pieces.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that the pot of coffee didn't help, but that was my first real like battle with, oh shit, and the ensuing up and down and kind of calming myself down, and then having it shoot out of control. It was funny to look back on, but it was not fun at the time.
Right. I mean, that I was so worried that story was going to go south.
No, it didn't.
Oh my gosh! So, I mean, from that experience, I mean, what did you then take to your future? I guess how do you use that story for your apprentices, and also how has that then affected the way that you kind of prepare for future tattooing?
Well, in the immediate aftermath of that, it would kind of serve as a rudimentary calming method for me, is to recognize it and address it with, whatever points of confidence that I have from the training I was given and all the theory that I've accumulated and all that fun stuff. But, other than that, I tell my apprentices all the time, start small, work up, and then keep a couple friends, close friends close to you for when you want to push the boundaries. Because if you don't push the boundaries, and this is actually, unless you have another question, I've got a more recent story where kind of the same thing happened, but it did push my boundaries. But anyway, I tell my apprentices that, you always have to build confidence. You have to tattoo every day. And if you don't, I mean, you're working backwards on yourself. But if you tattoo every day, you'll build a confidence where all of a sudden certain things that you do on a day-to-day basis, you don't have that hiccup or that reservation in the fact that you're tattooing somebody for life. I'm the only walk-in artist for my shop. And so I get the majority of, whatever's in vogue right now. So right now it's infinity signs with insanely little lettering inside of one of the curves, or the standard names, butterflies and hearts. So I've just gotten so damn good at it because that's all I've done for the past 2 years, minus a couple of, the friends that I bring that let me do cool shit on them. It's all money making things, but I really don't think twice about it because it's a name. It's an equation that I've already set in motion and memorized so many freaking times and done it backwards, forwards, lefts, right, upside down, and right side up. That it doesn't faze me that I'm marking somebody for life. Now it's all about the experience that I can give them, because probably about 80% of the people, the walk-ins that we get, are first timers. Right. So nobody wants a shitty my first tattoo story. They want, I want to give them, and we're structured, we're in a more affluent neighborhood and town, and it's a bitch and shop. So I want to be able to give people, a fantastic, just even if it's their first and only, I want that to be a positive experience that they're going to want to retell the story. So that doesn't bother me anymore. It's when things walk in where I want to snatch them up, because I'm in a photorealistic shop. One's a black and gray and one's color, both of the owners, the co-owners. Okay. And so the only way that I really get to push my trade and my skill level is to tattoo, my friends or clients that have an idea and money's not that much of an issue because, bigger, more intricate, detailed tattoos take longer, which equates to more money. Right. But anyway, so every so often I'll have to field a walk-in that will go outside of what I'm comfortable with. Like my black and gray game is not as comfortable as my color game, just because of the way that, I got into it. My mentor was color-based, and I didn't really have anybody to teach me black and gray. And there's definitely an approach and a tactic to it. just like there is in color. I just never learned it, so I shied away from black and gray because I didn't want to be that guy to give somebody a crappy black and gray tattoo.
Right.
But, as my walk-ins necessitated it more and more, and I got to shade, 3-dimensional hearts and all that fun shit in black and gray, my black and gray got smoother and lighter and more photorealistic. So
practiced it.
I was kind of using the walk-ins, all the leeway that I could squeeze out of them to give me a challenge. And then all of a sudden, my 2 boys are tattooing, somebody walks in, so I go in to greet him, and he's an older ex-Navy vet, and he wanted a full sleeve black and gray of all of these memorable naval insignias, like I don't know, I'm not a huge Navy guy, but anyway, anchors and obviously a compass and a rotor, all that fun shit. But he wanted the whole sleeve in black and gray, and so I didn't make a hiccup. I explained to him the process of how a sleeve is compiled and executed, and basically took his deposit and said, "Yeah, man, I got this." And I was, proverbially speaking, crapping a brick because I've never done a full black and gray sleeve. I've done chunks of them, done half sleeves, but never a full one. And that's always, kind of a mile marker in your careers is first sleeve, first torso, first back piece, first throat. And so he looked at my work on my Instagram, which is always, unfiltered and all that fun shit. So he looked at my work and he was like, "Yeah, man, let's do it." And so he gave me a little confidence, which I passed on to myself. And I was like, "Yeah, man." So I started pulling reference that day. Another thing is tattoos in certain areas have caused me major anxiety. We'll skip over my favorite one from Hollywood Boulevard in California, Street Shop. But I've had certain clients in the body modification industry have a desire to modify certain parts of their body, we'll say. There is a different tact and approach and execution for, let's say, genital tattoos, where it's possible, but you're walking a really, really thin line, technically, from where the ink needs to be placed in the skin and what's too deep and may cause nerve damage. They don't teach that in your standard apprenticeship.
I can't imagine. Right.
So when a client walks in with a lot of good money and they say, "I want this tattooed, have you done these before?" If you say no, 100% of the time people are going to go, "Okay," and walk away.
Right.
Because they want somebody who's done it before. Well, in the tattooing industry, there's only one way to let's say practice in those areas, and that's on yourself. So some of the crazy decisions I've made in the past have been, beneficial to my trade and my skill. So when you say yes, have you done them before? Yes, they say, "Okay, let's go." And then you become one of the select few people who actually knows how to properly execute that without screwing anybody's afterlife up.
Sure.
So I've done certain areas that I'm familiar with tattooing because I was the only one who would do it. So, that became hey, I'm looking for this guy because he does this.
Okay.
A lot of guys get a reputation for their black and gray or their color. And where I was and what I was willing to do for the money was, I got a reputation for tattooing that. So fast forward 10 years to present day, actually 2 weeks ago, a woman walks in and, well put together, older, probably not older, but like 45, mid-40s, beautiful woman. And she walks in and she has an air of confidence. A lot of people who you don't walk in and you don't see visible tattoos look kind of meager because it's their first time in a tattoo shop or they're scared, all the stereotypes and all that crap.
Right.
So she has an air of confidence around her but no visible tattoos. And she walks up and she's very soft-spoken. And I've a little light in hearing, so she had to get kind of close because she wouldn't speak up. And she goes, "Can I have an odd request?" So, "Well, what is it? I've tattooed almost everything. You're not going to shock me. I've been in this industry way too long." And she gets up close and she whispers, she goes, "I want my nipples pigmented because this, that, and the other thing." She was a very, very, very blonde woman, and I guess that part of the body is a little on the ghostier side.
Okay.
Anyway, she wanted me to make them a little pinker and darker and shade them and make them look realistic.
Sure.
And while I've tattooed over them in the past in, designs and chest pieces and full side panels and stuff like that, I've never actually pigmented them. And there's a sect of the tattoo industry that does full 3-dimensional nipples that they tattoo over mastectomy patients.
Reconstructive tattoos.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's in my head. The anxiety of never having tattooed. Basically, that's an aesthetic tattoo. It's like cosmetic tattooing, eyeliner, and I've never done that before. Oddly enough, I've done enough face tattoos, but I've never done like blush or anything like that. And that in and of itself, again, is a different art because the needle depth and the application, all the pigments.
It's a whole different style, it sounds like.
Sorry?
It's a whole different style, it sounds like.
Yes. So add that to the fact that, I've always known that region in women is always a little bit more sensitive, and it's new territory for me. So obviously the anxiety peaks. What happens? The woman rolls up to make the appointment in a brand new X7, so she's got money. If I blow this, she's going to destroy the release and come after me personally in a lawsuit. Anything's possible in this industry. Even though, they sign releases of liability and stuff, if you're well connected enough money to throw at a lawyer, they'll shred that thing in a second. So, of course, I take the appointment because it's a tattoo. I mean, I can't let this get into my head or I'm going to sit stagnant. I want to grow in my tattooing ability. So I take the appointment and, man, I'm on the internet for a week, sweating bullets, researching, reconstructive tattooing and approaches, and researching all these giants that I follow for their standard tattoos who do repigmentation and reconstructive surgery. I'm following them, trying to get, any kind of information that they did in an interview or comments or this and that. And I'm sweating bullets, and day comes, I get there early, I set up, I'm back and forth in and out of my head, trying to just suppress it like if it was a bad acid trip or something, where you try to control it instead of fixing the problem. And so I'm pacing, and all of a sudden it dawns on me that part of the body is used to nurse, children, and it's made from the factory, quote unquote, to get beat up and abused, because kids don't care. They just want milk, right? They're not, being any kind of gentle. So the part of the body was designed to take abuse. I'm not doing a full 3-dimensional rendering of that natural body part. I'm just
adding color,
augmenting what's already there. I'm not reconstructing it. I'm not reshaping it.
Yeah.
And so I thought about that, and I was like, this is just another tattoo. It's just on a different part of the body I haven't tattooed before. There's no reason to get all freaked out.
Right.
And then I started freaking out about matching the color. Oh my God. Well, do I have the right color in my skin tone sets? Oh shit. Oh man, everything just immediately flew back into the wind. And then I sat down and did the same thing. I remembered that I studied the color wheel for a reason. I studied the relationship of colors and hues and tints and tones. And if worst comes to worst, I can mix it off the tip of the needle like I do with most of my other colors in, you see a photorealistic portrait, it's got 9 skin tones in it. You don't perceive all of them, but most of them are mixed off the tip. They're a combination of 2 or more of the existing inks that came out of the bottle.
Right.
So, I talk myself down again. It's just basic logic. You do this all the time with different colors. Why is one tone set going to be different? And that's skin tones. You just look at what's there, and in your mind add a couple pigments of a different shade and figure out where you need to be, and then it becomes a proverbial math problem.
Right.
What percentage of this color on top of what percentage of that color do I need to achieve the result?
Right.
And then it was just execution. It's just brush it in like you would a standard tattoo if you were shading black and gray.
It sounds like you had to kind of catch yourself going down the rabbit hole of crazy thoughts.
That's my natural reaction to everything in life. If there's something where if there's an issue that pops up or something that may be an issue, if I have time to think about it and worry about it, then I worry about it. And it's not until somebody comes and says, do you have any control over the situation? No. Okay, then chill the hell out.
Right.
That, or I logically talk myself out.
Right.
And logic is a big thing for me when it comes to, like I said, problems in my life, but mainly for tattooing. Tattooing for me is a lot of if-then equations.
Yeah.
Like the one class I took in Java coding way the hell back when, a lot of coding is based on if-then. And so tattooing for me is the same thing. If I'm working on a client and the ink isn't taking, like I'll run a line and wipe and half of the ink is under the skin, but I know I pierced the skin because I can see the irritation. It's, what is the problem? Skin's not taking ink. Well, it could be this, or this. And I can adjust 3 of them on the fly, and then I'll lay another line and, okay, it took or it didn't take. Okay, that takes these 3 possibilities out. Now I'm left with these 2. I can make 2 adjustments here, drop it, and the line's fine.
Right.
Same thing, you can size people up. And I mean, this isn't in a negative way, but I mean, you can tell generally the texture of somebody's skin if I need to turn the give of my machine up or down. If they're older, generally they have more frail skin. I need a softer hit from my machine, so I'll turn my machine down, the voltage down, my hand speed down. I'll adjust the execution of the tattoo and the way my tools perform.
Right.
And I could be totally wrong, but the majority of what you see is generally what you get. You know, somebody comes in, they're super tan. Either they're not going to take care of your tattoo because they're going to go put it in a tanning bed, or they spend a lot of time in the sun. A, tattooing them is going to be a bitch because their skin's tough as leather. And B, your tattoo is probably going to look like shit because they're going to go fishing the next day. So you can judge a lot of things by looking and thinking.
Right.
But color theory is the same thing, man. If and then. If you do this, will the color mud? Will it amplify it? Will it tone it down?
But it sounds like all that has just come through practice and just working the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Practice
and listening. That's what a lot of my apprentices don't do or are good at. And that comes back to how long your apprenticeship lasts. Is your ability to absorb and tweak however you need to tweak it so your brain can wrap around it.
Yeah.
And absorb concepts, because a lot of tattooing is conceptual. I remember I was never allowed in my mentor's station while he was tattooing, but we had like little 4-foot pony walls, and I spent my every day, a whole year, on the other side of that pony wall, glued to that motherfucker, just asking him questions. And how I learned things, like I would watch him fixing up an old tattoo, and there would be some yellow in there, and he'd want to blend into the yellow, and he'd blend with, I don't know, green, or pick a color. I don't remember what the color was, but the existing tattoo, like I said, had that existing color, and he would blend into it. And so that spawned me to ask, can you still blend a tattoo? How old's that tattoo? 5 years? You can still blend into it? Yes. Why? Well, because the ink stays stagnant and liquid inside of the skin, so it never dries up, quote upon quote. Just things like that. And all of that stuff, if you retain it, then you can apply it in those situations where you don't have somebody over your shoulder where you can ask questions to or hold your hand.
Right.
Now, it's the same as anybody who, like you, man. You went to God knows how many schools, how many degrees, but most of that knowledge that you were given in all of those classes leading up to your present state, you've retained and can apply. If you see somebody exhibiting this trait, you can reach into that big brain of yours and figure out, okay, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this.
That's generous of you. But I hear what you're saying. It's also that, so using that logic, though, to kind of pull yourself to ground yourself in that which you already know, the stuff that you've practiced, the stuff that you've asked about, all the knowledge that you've achieved, or that you've, earned, I should say. How do you keep yourself from going down the rabbit hole? You kind of talked about the two things, right? One, the rabbit hole is your natural go-to, but logic is the thing that grounds you into kind of calming the heck down and being able to do your job effectively. How do you manage that interplay between the two, or catching yourself in the rabbit hole and pulling yourself into logic? Is there something that you do, or is there something that has been helpful to bring in logic faster than just letting yourself spiral to hell?
You're probably going to laugh at the answer, because the first thing that popped into mind was quantitative and not qualitative. But the best answer I can give you is common sense.
Okay.
Common sense allows me to use either the logic we talked about or just general common sense of avoiding that rabbit hole. Everybody knows, everybody who's done any kind of a drug that they weren't familiar with in their life, that experimentation phase, we'll blame it on. Everybody who's done that knows that there's a trip that whatever drug it was, if it was hallucinogen, depressant, whatever, they've had a bad, quote unquote, bad trip. Where, and then, you know, it's, they'll tell pretty much the same story. It crept up on me, it dawned on me, and then the next 7 hours sucked. And then you start talking to the degenerates that I used to hang out with, you know, all the E-tards and, you know, the old acid trippers and shit like that. And I'll tell them my bad trip story, and they'll just immediately trumpet and just be like, dude, you only did it once, huh? It's like, yeah, I had a bad trip that one time. Only an idiot would do it again.
Why would I do that again?
Man. Yeah. And you always get the same answers from these idiots. Oh, no, man, you just got to learn to realize and recognize the onset of a bad trip, and then you got to have your friends work yourself out of it. Well, it's funny that a lot of these idiots say that, because my bad trip on mushrooms in my one experience, when I was alone, I didn't have that support system. Out here, I put myself, or I was lucky enough to find myself in a shop with the two co-owners became my Florida family, man. We were so goddamn close, and just because we click and we vibe. But I know, and it's been told to me verbatim, that if I ever get upside down or sideways in a piece where I don't think it's going to come out to the customer satisfaction or my satisfaction, that I can always hand it off to them or have them come in and do like a side conference. Or if I'm totally fucked, and forget the language, then they'll come in and they'll finish that, because not only does the name of the shop and its reputation in the community, you know, that's huge to them because that's all of our livelihood, but they want to see me succeed, because they know that if I have, they know me, and personally, if I have such a failure that I need to hand it off to somebody else, like an, oh shit, let me talk to you for 30 minutes and kind of coach me through this one. Yeah. But like if I have to hand it off, that's going to screw me tremendously for weeks, if not months, on my confidence level. Like I said, it's that confidence level that you build that allows me to just bypass that little rabbit hole on things that I know I can destroy. But back to the community is I have that safety net, and I know that I can, they won't be happy about it, but I can push my limits to the point where I have that backup if I need it.
Right, that back
so
pocket
I don't even
confidence.
Need that. But conversely, the common sense in me that was previously discussed, if I mean, now I have the experience to where if I land a piece that is a little beyond my means or pushing my limits, and I know that, then I will do my due diligence and do my homework. I'll pull my reference, I'll get them approved by the client, and I'll sit there, and if it's really over my head, I'll run the whole process in a painting, because I run my paintings the same way I run my tattoos. I'll stencil out a painting, transfer the stencil onto the canvas, and then I start my painting process. I learned how to stencil for my painting from my tattoos. So if I think I'm in over my head, I'll stencil when I'm going to tattoo on my client, and I'll paint it, because not only do I get the muscle memory from painting the lines that now I'm going to go back and tattoo, now I can build my color palette. Now I can work on my color theory. And there's, if you blow it, man, you fucking wait a couple days and you let the oil dry and you paint over it. You know, there's no real oopses in paintings. As Bob Ross says, there's only happy mistakes. That's good, not so much. But it's like I said, man, it's common sense to stop, realize that I am displaying signs of anxiety over this piece. I already took the deposit, so I'm committed to this gentleman or this woman. You know, I can't back out on it. I can't transfer him over to my boss, who's $75 an hour more expensive than I am. You know, I don't want to eat the difference, because that's what I would do being a good human being, having done that. Right. But I'll sit down if I'm a little, you know, weirded out, and I'll wait till I get home and I'll chill out. I'll put some comfortable music on, and I'll, like I said, I'll stencil all of it. I'll compile it just as I was going to tattoo it, and I'll paint it. Right. Right. I mean, to me, that seems like common sense, but common sense ain't that common these days anymore, which is why I thought you would laugh at my answer. Fair enough. Yeah, man. I know. I mean, the humility in me that I wish more artists had is the game is always changing, and there was always somebody, even if it was 5 minutes before you picked up a pencil, they already picked up a pencil. So their shit's going to be stellar. Even if you grow at the same rate, you're never going to surpass them or reach their level. the humility in me allows me to recognize that. And so I'm constantly pushing and uncomfortable, which is becoming a new norm, which is good for me for progress,
right?
Because I have a way to handle, I put myself in that uncomfortable situation and I realize it, but I did it intentionally because I know that I have at least the basic fundamentals to get me started, and then I can ask questions,
Totally, yeah. Well, I know in the sake of time, is there anything else that if you could give advice to perhaps another tattoo artist or a guy that's just getting started, a woman that's just getting started out in the business, who's maybe having some jitters or some anxiety about this, what is there any takeaway that you could give them as they're starting their journey?
Yeah, actually, and I can even broaden on that since, like I said, I used to work in the trades, but put yourself in a position before you begin that journey. Hold out for that really stellar artist that you admire or know somebody's reputation. Don't go in, don't jump into apprenticeship with somebody who's got a habit that they're not willing to kick or that's going to impede them and impede you. Because the minute you get stagnant in this industry, in any industry, you're done, man. Because like I said, this industry moves at light speed. So choose, like I said, I got told no and shut down a lot looking for my apprenticeship, but I just kept after it and hold out, have standards to know what you want, because you will, for the first year and a half, you spend every waking moment around that person. You're going to start to emulate them, their social patterns. You're going to emulate any habits that they have. So just don't set yourself up to fail.
Okay.
But don't ever be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions to the point where you piss him off. I got sent home so many times because I wouldn't shut the fuck up. He's like, dude, just go outside, go smoke a cigarette or something, because I need 5 minutes away from you. Yes. But be that person, because there's no stupid piece of information in that man's brain. It's just how you use it and absorb it and turn it around. But when I was self-taught. My painting, when I painted cars and stuff like that, I used to do, airbrush motorcycles and jackets and paint full cars and stuff like that. And I was self-taught in that industry. My dad was a weekend warrior. He'd paint a boat every so often and teach me kind of the basics. Mm-hmm. Then when I jumped into it professionally, I pussyfooted around a lot of where I got my training and all that fun shit, because a lot of it I read or I watched YouTube videos that was in the YouTube's infancy. But any piece of information that I can find pertain to painting, chemicals, application, all that fun stuff. And I got, I started in a job and I talked a really good game because I had all that theory. But the minute it came to nut up or shut up, when they went, okay, here's a 10,000 pound hydraulic cylinder, paint it, and it all has to pass quality control, go. There were definitely some things that I ran into that I didn't, pick up on YouTube or something. But anytime paint would do something weird, I would use that common sense that I referred to earlier. I'd go look at the paint can. I'd look up the manufacturer and call their tech support. Hey, this is what happened. What was the cause of it? And I remember this one time, man, tech support couldn't even handle it. So I was like, how the fuck am I going to figure this out? It's not online. I can't get tech support to fucking help me. So that common sense, I was like, I used to get out at 3:30. So I stopped by, I got off work, I stopped by a mini mart, and I went to an old school auto body shop. And at the time it was like 4:30. And I walked in, I asked to see a manager. And I was like, look, man, I'm a painter. I'm not in your trade. I'm not competition, but it's almost 5 o'clock. Your boys are almost off. I have a couple questions on something that happened to me today, and I have a 12-pack right here. You picking up when I'm putting down? And they're like, oh, hell yeah, come on back. And so, we'd all have a couple beers, and I'd ask these old timers, this is what happening. Oh, man, that's called blushing. I haven't seen that in a long time. That was some of my old school memories. And so, it depends on how you approach it. But if you ever have a question, there's always an answer out there. It's just
being
how
diligent.
You approach getting that knowledge.
Right. Oh man,
so,
I've so many more questions, but I'll have to jump in at another time. We'll have to catch up again.
Hell yeah.
But all right, Rick. Well, thank you so much. Now I'll off air. I'll ask you now, but if you could also email me some of the contact information for your Instagram and maybe anywhere else. But where can people find information about you to see your work?
My Instagram's open. My Instagram is Rick_Twisted Love Tattoos. Or you could look up Twisted Love Tattoos just on a webpage. We have our own webpage, and then that'll have links to all of our individual Instagram accounts.
That's awesome.
Facebook is Rick Fitzwater, but my Instagram is where all my stuff goes. My Facebook's just, keeping track of old friends.
Fair enough. All right, Rick. Well, thanks so much for taking the time, and keep it up, man.
Will do. All right.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for making it through that episode. That was, again, as I said at the top of the show, that was a really fun episode, and I learned a lot from Rick. So you can check him out over Instagram. I put his Instagram on the on my Instagram post. It's also on the episode page. But again, check out his work. He does some fantastic work, and if you are in the Jupiter, Florida area, give him a call. See if you can work something out with him. So again, everybody, if you have any questions for Rick or questions about this series, you can always go to fearcastpodcast.com or find me at Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast over at Instagram. You can message me about this interview with Rick. If you have any follow-up questions for Rick, I'm sure he'd be happy to be on to answer any questions that you might have. Additionally, everybody, if you have a question for a future episode, go over to Fearcast Podcast. You can also send me a message over at Instagram. I'm more than happy to receive those questions there. So, everybody, until next time, or excuse me, before I even get to that, please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your treatment, in your recovery, you can go over to fearcastpodcast.com, and there's going to be some information at the Find Help link. So, until everybody, I just can't do this. It is super late, everybody, and it's just going to sound like this. So, until next time, everybody, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.